Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets. Our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, and tax prep and planning are all under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com. Hi, and welcome back. I hope that you've been enjoying this One Big Beautiful Bill journey. We are now at the life stage of empty nest and pre-retirement. I've worked with a lot of families that have gotten to this point. I think it's one of the most underrated life transitions that people go through. And if you just let me opine on this for a second on the emotional side of what I do, is I see the statistics of divorce rates spiking for people in their 50s and 60s. Why? Because you've spent your entire life, or these life stages, if you will, that we've been through, raising your kids, managing your career, moving up, and you've lost that relationship with your spouse, partner, significant other. And one day you look at each other when the kids are gone and you're like, who are you? And what did you do with my spouse? And I talk about this a lot with families of all ages, but especially those that are my age. And I can't believe I'm saying I'm going to be 50 next year. So I'm in my late 40s still. But whether you're in your late 40s, early 50s, 50s, 60s, doesn't matter. Having these conversations, putting time into relationships with your spouse and significant others is vitally important, because trust me, divorce at this stage of life is very expensive. And I'm not saying that that's the only reason why you should stay together or not stay together, but there is a financial cost to divorce at this stage of life. And there's a reason why you are with the person you're with, good, bad, and different. And I just want people to understand that the investment they make in their personal lives is just as much as banners just as much as the investment that you're making in your financial life through savings and good planning and taxes and college and all of that, all the things that you've done up to this point. I would strongly encourage you to continue to build that relationship with your partner and significant other. And no, I'm not a therapist, but doing what I do for all these decades now, I've seen a lot. And that's one of the most heartbreaking things that I see is when people build this entire life only to get to this point where it goes in a different direction. So let's now switch over to the regular scheduled program of this and talking about how this life stage, how this One Big Beautiful Bill is going to impact your life from here. So I will say this, for this stage of life, I don't know how much the Big Beautiful Bill did for you. I will say there's probably three important things that it didn't do, which was, one, it didn't increase your marginal tax brackets. So if the 2017 Jobs and Tax Act that Trump put through in his first term would have expired, you would have seen probably a 2 to 3% increase in your taxes. Now, that would stink from a individual standpoint, but from an economic standpoint, I don't know if the country would have been able to handle an increase like that. It did slightly increase your standard deduction. So most likely, you're still going to, if you've been taking the standard deduction, you're going to continue to take the standard deductions. There are no new deductions that you can itemize. Quite frankly, a lot of, most of those were taken away in 2017. They did not add any new ones back. The other key thing to remember here is the retirement catch-up contributions that you can do. I pointed this out in the last stage of building years, but once you hit 50, you get an extra $7,500 that you can put into a 401k, whether it's Roth or traditional, or another $1,000 in a Roth or a traditional IRA. So those are really important things from a planning standpoint that you should be aware of. But outside of that, given where your income might be, and that's the topic you're going to hear me talk about a lot, phase out ranges, income thresholds in this part of life, because these deductions are getting a lot of attention, but I don't think they're going to be much sizzle when you line up what you're able to do. So with that being said, what are some of the downsides to the big, beautiful bill at this stage of life that you should be aware of? So let me share my screen. I'm going to talk about the SALT deduction. I've talked about this before in the other life stages, but it has increased from $10,000 to $40,000 for married filing jointly, $5,000 to $20,000 for single. But again, I'm going to make this point again and again. First and foremost, this deduction is only for the years 2025 to 2029, and then it reverts back to our current levels or last year's levels in 2030. You'll find with some of these deductions that there are specific periods of time that they're good for, and that the income thresholds can change quite dramatically. So if your modified adjusted gross income for married filing jointly is over $500,000, that's when you begin the phase out range. Once you get to $600,000, it reverts back to the floor of $10,000. So what does that mean? If you have property taxes and state and local income taxes of, say, $50,000 and you make $600,000 of adjusted gross income, your SALT deduction is going to go all the way back to $10,000. Why is this important? You're going to hear me also talk a lot about income management, because at this stage of life, if you're not already doing so, you're potentially looking at doing Roth conversions. Well, guess what? When you do those Roth conversions, that's treated as ordinary income, which increases your modified adjusted gross income. So you could be doing all the right things from a Roth conversion standpoint, but then you end up missing some of these deductions. Now, I will tell you, it requires in-depth analysis to be able to provide a bigger picture portrait for you of whether it's better to continue Roth conversions or potentially reduce those to be able to take advantage of some of these deductions. From some of the case studies I've already worked on and tried to prepare for with the families I work with here at TAMA, it's still better to keep doing those Roth conversions and just forgo these deductions. The phase out and the cap increase by 1% each year, that's not going to move the needle for most of you. I've talked about this in every stage of the One Big Beautiful Bill series as well, this vehicle interest deduction. Again, this is one that's going to get a lot of attention, but I don't know how meaningful it's going to be for somebody in your life stage. But the major hurdle, the second bullet point, is that it's got to be on a new car assembled in the United States. It can't be a used car. It can't be a new car that's made in Germany and then shipped over to the US. There's no deduction for those. The other key thing is, again, income limits. So if your adjusted gross income, married filing jointly, is $200,000 or more, you're going to start getting phased out of this. It's $100,000 for single filers. So you could see in the example, and if you're listening to this, basically, once you get over that threshold, you're going to see a 20% dollar for dollar decrease in the deduction. So if you're under the deduction, say your deduction may be like $8,000, but if you're over the threshold, it can get cut in half pretty darn quickly. So again, not knowing if the juice is worth the squeeze on this one, especially if we're trying to maximize after-tax returns by doing Roth conversions and other income management strategies. So just keep this in mind. And I've said this in the other life stages as well as part of this series, is that I think that with all these different deductions, with all these different hurdle rates, these income thresholds, the timing, like you can only get this deduction from years 2025 to 2028 or whatever it may be, they've actually made this more complicated. Like I go back to 2017 and the Jobs and Tax Act, like one of their big hype factors was, oh, we're going to simplify this. You could do your tax return on one piece of paper. Well, kind of, sort of, but not really. Some things did get simplified. They took away a bunch of deductions that you used to itemize for. They did away with all that. They brought the income tax rates down, and they increased your standard deduction. That's why last year I filed probably over 70 tax returns, and 90% of them all took the standard deductions. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of tax planning that goes into it, but you're taking the standard deduction because there's just not enough itemized deductions to be able to qualify. And again, even with them raising that SALT deduction that we just talked about, I still think that's going to be a challenge for most people. All right. So we've talked about some of the, I guess, upsides to this. Like, again, I think most of the upside to this bill for people in this life stage, and for me as an advisor, is it gives us some clarity about the tax rates and being able to do advanced tax planning. So the healthcare gap. If you're retiring before age 65, you're not eligible for Medicare. You probably already know that. It means higher out-of-pocket costs, whether it's COBRA or Marketplace or private insurance. The big, beautiful bill did nothing to create relief from this. So if you're retiring early, before 65, health insurance is going to be one of your biggest costs. And that's one of the reasons why some people, even though they have the financial well-being to retire early, they don't take into consideration the increase that they're going to have in healthcare. So that actually does prevent them from retiring early. Marriage penalty risk. This goes back to the thresholds I've been talking about. As your income probably is at its peak, you're making the most money in your entire career, incomes are high, you're going to get likely pushed into higher income tax brackets faster. So you just need to be aware of that and plan for it. And if you're able to own your own business, or you have variable income, or you may have some options to defer income through your employer, which I probably should do a whole episode on the pros and cons of that, because it's not all it's cracked up to be. That those avenues could be helpful. But again, a lot of these deductions or credits have relatively, again, this is all relative. If you're making a large income today, say $250,000 or more, and that's for the families, most of the families I work with, dual income, that's pretty much the minimum or higher, you're going to get phased out of these credits. So again, I think the headlines that you see, you need to really understand what's behind it, and more than likely, you're not going to get real help from it. And then the last downside is they really rolled back some of these energy credits. The most known one probably is the $7,500 EV credit. That's going away. But just as important, they are also doing away with a lot of home or energy home efficiency credits. Think of like new appliances, new windows, things of that nature. Some of those credits are getting eliminated altogether or being reduced. So what does that mean? So if you're in this life stage and you're looking at downsizing or moving to somebody else, place else and wanting to remodel, maybe you were thinking, oh, I'm going to get all these credits for high energy efficiency. Probably not. So that's going to increase the cost of potentially downsizing or remodeling. So with all that being said, what are the planning actions that you can take at this stage of life? And as I've said in other life stages, it's part of this series. Amex used to have this commercial and they said, memberships has its privileges. So if you're already part of the TAMA family, I'm already proactively taking steps with these action items. So nothing you need to worry about. But if you're thinking about working with an advisor, these are some of the things that you should think about. Or if you're trying to do it on your own, these are some of the things you should think about doing. If you're interested in having an in-depth conversation about how we may be able to help you in your situation at this life stage, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll give you some more information as we kind of wrap up this episode. But from a planning action standpoint, I've talked about this a lot. Executing Roth conversions. Again, this could end up meaning you're in a higher income threshold, which disallows some of the deductions. But again, depends on your own circumstance. I've seen more than likely these Roth conversions are still better than trying to optimize some potential $1,000 deduction you may get one time this year. Roth conversions are kind of like the gift that keeps on giving. Sequence withdrawal early. So I'm gonna flip through. Okay, so I didn't put that in here. So what I mean by this, I talked about this in the last stage of life, called the building years, is having a diversified bucket of assets, meaning you have some Roth, some traditional, some taxable. And why is that? Because in some years, depending on your income, Social Security included, you may end up getting pushed into higher tax brackets, especially if you're sitting on a lot of traditional assets that are going to require minimum distributions. And so some years you're going to want to pull from a Roth. Some years you're going to want to pull from traditional. Some years you're going to want to pull from taxable. The goal with tax planning at this stage in life and into retirement is maximizing your after-tax returns. And part of the way that I'm able to do that is by having the ability to pull money from different accounts. So that's what I mean by sequencing withdrawals early and taking advantage of the different tax accounts that you have. I've already mentioned this, building a healthcare bridge, understanding if you're going to retire before age 65 and take Medicare, understanding what those costs are and what that's going to mean to your overall retirement plan. Social Security claiming prep. This one's going to get a lot more attention. The headlines are already out there about insolvency with Social Security. It's true, but not true. It just means that I think it's by the year 2035-ish that Social Security won't be able to pay out all the benefits currently being promised. So sooner or later, the government will have to do something. And it's a combination of things that no one wants. Raising taxes, increasing the retirement age for Social Security, a combination of both of those, or means testing. So I don't know what the final solution will be, but they need to do something. But I'm a firm believer that Social Security is not going to go away, but it's definitely going to change. And I get the question a lot, well, Paul, I shouldn't count on that as part of my plan. Take it out. Well, even with high net income families that I work with, if you take out Social Security, especially if you're planning on deferring that to age 70 and getting the max amount that you can, for a dual income family, that could be $100,000 of income every year that you've just now taken out of your plan. That makes it extremely hard, challenging, overwhelming to be able to save for a retirement that could span 30, 35, 40 years. So I'm always, every situation's different. Every family situation's unique. But I've found that keeping Social Security in your plan is a must, and trying to delay as much as possible before you take it often ends up putting you in a better situation. Housing and lifestyle strategy. So what do I mean by this? It means going back to that opening dialogue that I had, being on the same page with your spouse or partner, understanding where you want to live. How much do you want to continue to help kids? Maybe you're starting to have grandkids. What does that mean? Like, how much are you trying to help, say, your kids, pay for a down payment on a new house, because home affordability is so terrible right now. So it's understanding all those different things, all those different nuances. And I've pointed this out every stage of life. And I emphasize this to every family I work with at TAMA, is this understanding your purposes and your objectives. Because when people know or understand what their purpose is and have objectives that support that, it makes creating these action items much easier, and the probability of success of a family hitting their objectives goes up exponentially by writing it down. There's research that proves this time and time again. And I cannot emphasize that enough. If you take one thing away from this particular life stage, this particular episode, or the entire series that I've done on this one big, beautiful bill, it always comes back to what's your purpose? What do you want to do? Your why and your objectives. Having a clear understanding of that. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to change over time. Purposes are usually pretty solid. Objectives can change more often. Life happens. Every plan that I put together, I tell families I work with, the only thing I can guarantee you is that it's going to be wrong. I just don't know the magnitude or when. But these are living, breathing documents. Our lives are ever changing. And so we need to be able to adapt and pivot with it, along with our financial plans. Gifting support, I kind of just noted that, but there's a lot of different things that you may want to start looking at, such as donor advised funds, if you're charitably inclined. But again, they made permanent the $15.2 million estate tax benefit. So a lot of people don't need to probably worry about the estate planning tax, but you'd be surprised, because your assets will continue to compound even in retirement, hopefully, and you may be up against that. But to back up more specifically, I'm thinking of gifting to kids, gifting to grandkids, knowing what those limits are, and being able to, if you have the ability to give money away now when you can see people enjoy it. Just remember that when it comes to charitable giving. And along those lines, one thing that they did add this year was this universal non-itemized charitable deduction. So if you take the standard deduction and you made charitable contributions, you weren't able to, deduct those. But now they're giving married filing joint up to $2,000 of a deduction for charitable contributions, even if you go with the standard deduction. So that was a lot to throw at you. As I mentioned before, I think they've complicated things with this one big, beautiful bill. And it's overwhelming, and it's hard to know which way to turn sometimes. And while there's definitely some pros to it, again, tax rates staying the same, not increasing, it does create a lot of question marks. It does create a lot of tax planning opportunities in conjunction to what you're doing for retirement. At this stage of the game, you're probably not paying for college anymore, but you may be helping your kids pay off student loans. So that's where the understanding the tax gifting rules and deductions come into play. So life is complicated. even at this age. And then you throw in, as we didn't talk about, if you work for a company and you have restricted stocks or stock options, things of that nature, and managing your capital gains risk is really important. So there's no shortage of priorities pulling at you at this life stage, just like your building years, just like your career and family growth years. As I've said before, parenting is a 24/7, 365-year contact sport these days. There doesn't seem to be an off season. It's just one after another after another. And while you may be empty nesters now, you never stop being a parent. That's one thing that has been ingrained in me with the families that I've worked with over the years that are in this life stage and in retirement. And it's those really words of wisdom, that sage advice that I take away from those people that have gone before me and are in these different life stages that I can take and reflect back on and hopefully help educate and be supportive and make better family and financial decisions for those that I work with and those that I try to help. So if you have any questions on the material that I've covered in this episode or any of this One Big Beautiful Bill series, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us obviously on YouTube. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can look at our website, tamacapital.com. And if there's anything that I can do to potentially help your family work your way through this, don't hesitate to reach out. That's all for this episode. We'll see you next time. Now that you've made it to the end of another great conversation, are you looking for more? If so, head over to tamacapital.com, where you will find all of our conversations. Use the search feature to find the topic or guest you would love to learn more about. Also, don't forget to make someone else's day by sharing our show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.